Buen Camino, pilgrims. I am Jeremiah Gibbs. I'm your Camino guide, and glad today to be walking through the map of Camino de Santiago. I know that for many of you, as you're beginning to get to know and have the dream and begin to consider this possibility of walking Camino, it takes some orientation. So today we're going to do kind of an orientation to the map of Camino de Santiago. We're going to do kind of a virtual tour through Camino Frances, which is one of the most popular pilgrimage routes. And so hopefully you will enjoy this little trip through Camino today. I do a lot of videos on this channel that teach people about Camino de Santiago. We talk about sort of tips and logistics and planning processes. We talk about the equipment and gear that you'll need for Camino de Santiago, and also talk about kind of the spirituality and motivations and theology of pilgrimage as well. And so if you like this video, go ahead and click like on the video, and also subscribe to this channel so you can see more, and looking forward to being on this journey with you. So as you're getting to know Camino de Santiago, maybe the first thing to talk about as far as we get oriented to the map is to know that Camino de Santiago, which simply means the way of St. James, is not just a single hiking path, but is a pilgrimage that comes from lots of different places, all ending at the tomb of St. James the Apostle. Now, many people, as they make Camino de Santiago, it is a deeply spiritual, it is a traditionally Catholic pilgrimage, meaning that it's an opportunity for spiritual growth and connection with God, connection with one's own priorities. But in the last probably 30 years or so, Camino de Santiago has become a path for all people. And really, it's there's just as many people today who are making Camino de Santiago who are not religious, who are not particularly spiritual people, although often are very spiritually connected during the pilgrimage itself, which is one of the great things about this route. But this way of St. James, Camino de Santiago, actually begins in lots of different places. And if you'll see on this first map that I have for you, you'll see that there are pilgrimage routes that come from all over Spain and Portugal, as different people would make their way into Santiago from all kinds of different areas. So Santiago de Compostela was the destination, but actually the way of St. James included lots of different possible paths. If you'll see on this first map, the dark blue line that runs across the top of the map there is Camino Frances. Now, Camino Frances is by far the most popular of the pilgrimage routes. If you hear people talk about that, use language like "I walked the whole Camino," usually what they mean is they walked Camino Frances from the border of France to Santiago de Compostela. That's kind of the most traditional route for most English speakers in particular. Some French folks will start in Le Puy, which is quite a bit another distance away. But most of the time when folks talk about walking the whole Camino, they're talking about walking from the border of France along Camino Frances to Santiago de Compostela. So, as you see, there's all these different routes that across Spain. One of the reasons that Camino Frances becomes the most popular of those routes is because actually people traditionally would start at their homes and make their path to Santiago de Compostela from wherever they were across Europe. And so if you look on this second map, you'll see that actually there are paths that kind of strike out all across Europe. But the reason Camino Frances becomes the most popular route is because that was an easy place for people where these different paths from across Europe would converge in Saint Jean de Pied-de-Port as a way of making their way across the northern threshold of Spain. So the path simply is there's sort of a practical reason that this path becomes the most popular of the routes as folks would make their way across Europe into Spain. So today, as we talk about Camino, I want to introduce you to this Camino Frances route, because this is the one for probably, if you're getting to know Camino, this is probably the one that most of you will be thinking about as you consider the possibility of walking Camino. I think probably for most pilgrims, this is one of the first routes that they consider if they're going to make their first pilgrimage to Camino de Santiago. And notice I said first, because so many of you will make this pilgrimage over and over again. Once you've done it once, it kind of gets in you, and lots of folks will make that pilgrimage more than one time. But I will say one reason you might want to not choose Camino Frances is it is a much more busy pilgrimage route. There are a lot more pilgrims on the route, and so some people may choose one of the other pilgrimage routes because these other Caminos are less populated. So I want to switch over to this Google Maps, Google Earth map of the Camino, because this is going to help us to kind of see lots of different paths along the Camino. You'll see the route going all the way across Spain there, and the path, we're going to do kind of a quick walkthrough first, so that you can just begin to see the different places that are on there, and then we're going to walk through the map a bit more slowly. So you're going to begin in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and you're going to walk westward to Santiago de Compostela. Generally speaking, there are kind of three regions that you're going to cross during that pilgrimage route. The furthest the furthest eastward section, and the part where you would begin, is going to cross the Pyrenees in Basque country. This is very mountainous region, which we'll talk more about, but this is a very challenging mountainous climb. Once you reach Burgos, you really begin sort of the second stage of Camino de Santiago, which is known as Meseta. Meseta just is like a big flat table, and Meseta is going to take us across this middle region, the Castilla region of Spain, and that's going to be kind of its own culture and its own kind of walking culture as well. And then just as you enter, as you exit the Meseta, you're going to enter into the another mountain range, where you will enter into Galicia, which has its own food and culture and its own kind of step within the Camino pilgrimage as well. So you really begin in the mountains, you have a long stretch of flat in the middle, and then walk the last section in a kind of mountainous and hilly region until you reach Santiago de Compostela. So if we go back over to Saint Jean, then I want to talk to you a little bit more about this little town. There's nothing really particularly remarkable about this town. Probably no one would even know that the village exists, except that it is the beginning place for so many pilgrims. And really, the culture within that town has developed around the pilgrimage. There's a pilgrim office there where many people will get their Compostela and begin their pilgrimage, and this is the traditional kind of starting place for many pilgrims in this border town in France. If you begin there your first day, or for some people 2 days, some folks will stop at Orison on the way up the mountain, but for the first day or 2 days, you're going to cross over the Pyrenees and cross into Spain to arrive at Roncesvalles. And that Roncesvalles is said lots of different ways, so you may hear lots of different ways that folks say that, and I'm not sure that I could even tell you what the proper way is. I've heard it so many times, so many different ways. But Roncesvalles is the first town that you're going to come to. That is after quite a significant climb. This first day is very hard. It's also very beautiful. And so You'll make your way over to Roncesvalles, and then from there, there's going to be a series of smaller towns from Roncesvalles until you arrive in Pamplona. This is going to be a mountains region. You're going to have some pretty difficult, challenging climbs. Arriving at Pamplona, where you have the famous running of the bulls that happens in July. But for most of us, it is the place of these beautiful ancient walls into the city and the cathedral at Pamplona. And of course, it's one of the first places that you'll get sort of modern city that will walk into on Camino de Santiago. From Pamplona, you're going to walk out and continue through the mountains to arrive at Burgos. Burgos is another very large town. The cathedral in Burgos is renowned the world over for its architecture, its flying buttresses. Very famous cathedral there in Burgos, and a wonderful place to stop and to get a rest from exiting the mountains before you strike out across Meseta. Now, many people will tell you that the Meseta is challenging for a very different reason. You've had the physical challenge crossing over the Pyrenees, and now as you strike out across the Meseta, many people will say that this is a challenging region because it's a challenge to the mind. Some folks will say it's boring. Others will say it's a deeply kind of spiritual connection as you strike out across this long, flat region. There is a large town near the end of Meseta, León. León is by far my favorite town on the entire Camino. I love the beautiful cathedral and the church, Basilica Church that's there, the food, just the culture, the excitement in León, and the Camino begins to get a bit more busy in León, as some folks that are making shorter distances will begin there. But really, I love León, and it's a great break after the Meseta. That's walking in and out of León is not particularly fun, but once you're there, really wonderful. After you leave León, you're going to walk into your next mountain range, and pretty significant climb even in the first couple days after Astorga. From Astorga up to Cruz de Ferro is usually about a day or day and a half walk, and Cruz de Ferro is a very famous location that many of you would have seen talked about and so on, where people leave a stone at the foot of the Iron Cross as a kind of ritual act of leaving their burdens on top of the mountain. So it's a really significant place for many people. It also is historically known as the highest place on Camino de Santiago. Technically, the highest point is about a half mile or so after Cruz de Ferro, but Cruz de Ferro is also, it's within a few feet of being the highest place on Camino de Santiago. Then you're going to walk down a very steep mountain on the backside of Cruz de Ferro, and walk into the town of Ponferrada. Now, Ponferrada is an amazing town as well. There's a Templars castle there that's an ancient castle that you can tour, and I definitely think it's worth touring this working castle and get a sense for what life was like in that time period. There's also a beautiful Basilica Church in Ponferrada, and a great place to stop and visit, and really love that town. When you come out of Ponferrada, you're going to be coming into a fairly hilly region. Right out of Ponferrada is fairly flat, and you're walking through some vineyards and so on. And then you're going to come to a pretty mountainous region. And one of the most significant climbs on Camino is up to O Sobrero. It's a pretty significant hill climb up to O Sobrero. And you can see even from the Google Earth images there that just the steep edges off that mountain, and it's a pretty significant climb to get up there, and definitely a challenging day along Camino. From Osabrero, you're going to continue through the mountains. It's pretty significant mountains again through here. It's some pretty hard climbing. I wouldn't say that it is too difficult by any means. Most people will not have a lot of problems with it, but it is pretty mountainous region coming out of Osabrero, and then eventually down the mountain towards Sarria. I think a great detour there would be to go to Samos. Samos is a monastery town, another great town along the Camino, where you can go and visit a working monastery, Benedictine monastery, where the monks keep silence and welcome pilgrims into their life of prayer. Out of Samos, you'll come to Sarria, which Sarria is the town that is usually considered the last starting point to earn your Compostela for walking 100 kilometers. So it's actually about 106 kilometers, I believe, to walk from Sarria. And folks, many times, first-time pilgrims will start in Sarria. It's only about 4 days walk, and so the traffic is going to pick up a lot in Sarria, and you're going to make your way across the hills of Santiago, across the hills towards Santiago. From here, it is less mountainous, certainly very hilly, but not a lot of significant mountain climbs from here on in those last 4 days, as you arrive then at Santiago de Compostela. Santiago de Compostela is another great, beautiful town, cathedral really at the center of that town's life in so many ways, but there's lots of touristy kinds of things to see, but certainly the highlight of that pilgrimage then is to enter the cathedral and attend Mass and make the end of your pilgrimage visiting the remains of St. James and ending there in Santiago de Compostela. So all told, you're going to walk about 500 miles or 800 kilometers to make your way across the Camino Frances. If you begin in St. John, you certainly can begin all along that route, and there's ways to begin at any town with any number of days. So regardless of how many days, how much time you have to be able to commit to the Camino path, there's a way to begin to plan that path from wherever you can start. And of course, if you want to continue on, then many people will leave Santiago de Compostela and go to Finisterre, which was traditionally known as the end of the world, and walk all the way to the ocean and dip your toes in the ocean afterward as well, if you really are still desiring to continue your walk. I hope that kind of whet your appetite for your Camino experience, that you will want to become a pilgrim with so many of the rest of us. If you want to know more, there's lots of more videos on this channel. Certainly check out some of my other videos. I have ones that give some logistics help and sort of planning helps for Camino de Santiago. We have some that talk about the motivations and spirituality of Camino, and also talk about some of the gear and equipment that you're going to need to be able to walk Camino de Santiago as well. So subscribe to this channel. That way you can find your way back here, and it would really help if you clicked like on this video. That will help other people who may be looking for this information to find it too. That really helps YouTube to be able to send that out to other people. So if you like it, then please click that like button and help get the word out that way. Buen Camino.